something is quietly taking shape around the New England Patriots. And if you've been paying close attention to every move, every discussion, every unanswered question, you can start to see a very clear picture forming. And it's not as simple as just adding talent. This is about direction, identity, and whether this roster is actually being built to compete now or still figuring itself out. Let's start with one of the biggest concerns that keeps coming up among fans, the tight end room. Right now, it simply doesn't look good enough. You have Hunter Henry as your clear number one, a player who has been reliable since arriving in 2021, but beyond that, things get shaky very quickly. The decision to bring in Julian Hill on a 3-year deal raises real questions. Not because he lacks physical tools, he's 6'4", 251 pounds, exactly the kind of build you want, but because the production just isn't there to justify him being the number 2 option in a system that needs versatility. When you look deeper, it becomes even more clear what the Patriots are doing. Hill isn't being brought in to be a receiving threat. His value is in blocking, and the numbers back that up. Solid grades in pass protection and run blocking, but only 15 catches in his most recent season. That tells you everything. This offense is trying to establish a physical identity again, but the problem is that in today's NFL, you can't afford to be one-dimensional at tight end. You need someone who can stretch the field, create mismatches, and actually scare defenses. And that's where the frustration starts to build. Because there were opportunities, there were names out there that could have changed the dynamic of this room entirely, but those moves didn't happen. Now, it feels like the Patriots are almost forced into addressing this in the draft. And yes, there are options, plenty of them, but relying on a rookie to immediately fix a positional weakness is always a risk. At the same time, this connects directly to another major storyline, the wide receiver situation. Because let's be honest, everything keeps circling back to one name. If that move doesn't happen, the Patriots are left in a very difficult position. The trade market isn't exactly full of ideal fits, and that's why the conversation keeps shifting toward the draft again. And this is where things get interesting. There's a very specific type of receiver this team is clearly looking for. Not just speed, not just route running, but size. A big-bodied receiver who can win contested catches, who can go up and get the ball at its highest point. Someone who gives the quarterback a real target in tight situations. That's been missing, and it's something the team seems determined to fix. One name that's starting to stand out in that conversation is a receiver who brings exactly that profile. Strong production, over 1,000 yards, nearly double-digit touchdowns, and more importantly, efficiency in deep situations. When targeted downfield, the numbers are elite high conversion rate, 0 drops, and a quarterback rating that jumps significantly when he's involved. That's not just production, that's impact. Now imagine pairing that kind of deep threat with a quarterback who already thrives throwing the ball downfield. That's where this starts to feel like more than just a potential draft pick, starts to look like a calculated fit, a move that could define how this offense evolves moving forward. But here's the bigger picture. The Patriots aren't just trying to add pieces, they're trying to balance an identity. You see it in the offensive line additions, where there's talent, but also uncertainty. You see it in the backfield, where the expectation is once again a split workload rather than a true featured back. And you definitely see it in the way they're approaching both the tight end and wide receiver positions. Even the projections for the season reflect this uncertainty mixed with optimism. There's a belief that this team can win games, potentially double-digit games, if things click, but at the same time. There are clear weaknesses that haven't been fully addressed yet. The home schedule looks favorable, the road game's more challenging, but overall, there's a sense that this team could surprise people or fall short if these gaps aren't fixed. So now, everything comes down to the next steps. The draft isn't just important, it's critical. It's where the Patriots will either solidify this roster or leave fans wondering what the plan really is. And that's the question I want to leave you with, because this is where opinions start to split. If the big move at wide receiver doesn't happen, do you trust this team to fix both the tight end and wide receiver positions through the draft alone? Or does that feel like too much to gamble on in one offseason? Because if you really think about it, relying entirely on the draft to solve two of your biggest offensive needs isn't just aggressive, it's risky in a way that could define the entire season before it even begins. And this is where the conversation starts to shift from what they should do to what they're actually preparing to do. Everything we've seen so far suggests that the Patriots are comfortable betting on development, not just from rookies, but from the players already in the building. That includes the current wide receiver group, which, let's be honest, still feels incomplete. You've got pieces. You've got guys who can contribute in specific roles. But do you have someone defenses truly fear? That's the real question. Because without that presence, everything becomes harder. The tight ends face more pressure underneath, the run game sees stacked boxes, and the quarterback is forced to make tighter throws into smaller windows. That's not a sustainable formula if your goal is to win consistently. And speaking of the quarterback, this is where things get even more important. When you have a young passer who thrives on pushing the ball downfield, you have to give him the right tools. You can't just ask him to adjust his game completely to fit the roster. The roster has to meet him halfway. That's how you accelerate development, not slow it down. Now, let's connect this to the offensive line, because this might quietly be the most important factor of all. There's optimism, but it's cautious. It's the kind of confidence that comes with a lot of ifs. If certain players perform the way they did in the regular season instead of the playoffs, if key additions stay healthy, if the interior holds up against stronger defensive fronts, that's not certainty, that's projection. And when your offensive line is a question mark, your margin for error everywhere else shrinks. Suddenly, that lack of a true number one receiver becomes more noticeable. That tight end limitation becomes more impactful. Everything is connected. Defensively, there's also a clear mindset forming. Instead of chasing aging veterans on short-term deals, the preference seems to be shifting toward drafting and developing edge talent, younger players, rookie contracts, long-term upside. It's a smarter approach in many ways, especially when you consider the depth available in this draft class. There are multiple prospects who could step in, grow into the role, and become foundational pieces rather than temporary fixes. But again, it circles back to balance. Because while building for the future is important, there's also a window right now where this team feels like it could compete if the right moves are made. And that's where fans start to get restless. Not because the plan is wrong, but because it feels incomplete. Even the projected win total reflects that tension. There's a belief this team could reach around 11 wins, driven by a favorable home schedule and a roster that, on paper, has improved. But projections don't win games. Execution does. Depth does. Star power does. And right now, the Patriots feel like a team that has improved their floor but hasn't fully raised their ceiling. So as we move closer to the draft, every decision becomes magnified. Do you stay patient and trust your board? Do you get aggressive and move up for a player you believe can change everything? Or do you spread your picks, fill multiple holes, and hope the collective improvement is enough? Because one thing is clear, this offseason isn't just about adding talent, it's about choosing a direction. Are you building something that can grow over the next few years, or are you trying to take a real step forward right now? That's the balance the Patriots are trying to strike, and whether they get it right or not is going to define not just this season, but the trajectory of the team moving forward. And this is where things get even more layered. Because once you start thinking about going all-in versus trusting the process, you realize the Patriots might actually be trying to do both at the same time manned. That's a very difficult line to walk. If you go all-in, you're talking about making a bold move, trading up, packaging picks, possibly sacrificing depth for one player you truly believe can change the offense overnight. That kind of move sends a message not just to the fans, but to the locker room that this team is ready to compete right now. But it also comes with pressure. That player has to hit. There's no margin for error when you give up multiple assets to go get someone. On the other hand, if you trust the process, you're spreading your picks across multiple needs. You're adding a tight end, a wide receiver, maybe an edge rusher, maybe more depth on the offensive line. You're building a more complete roster. But you're also accepting that you might not have that one true difference maker immediately. You're betting on development, coaching, and time. And based on everything we've seen so far, the Patriots seem to be leaning slightly toward that second approach, but with just enough flexibility to pivot if the right opportunity presents itself. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: roster identity. Because right now, this team feels like it's in transition. You see flashes of an old-school approach valuing blocking tight ends, bringing in a fullback-type presence, wanting to establish the run game, but at the same time, you're trying to build around a quarterback who thrives in a more modern, aggressive passing system. Those two philosophies can work together, but only if the pieces fit perfectly. And that's the challenge. If your tight end room is built primarily for blocking, then your wide receivers need to compensate by being dynamic playmakers. If your offensive line isn't dominant yet, your skill players need to create separation quickly. Everything has to complement everything else. Right now, it feels like the Patriots are still searching for that perfect balance. And let's not ignore the psychological side of this either. Fans are watching closely. They've seen the moves, they've seen the signings, and there's cautious optimism, but also skepticism. Because they've been here before, they've seen off-seasons that looked promising on paper, but didn't fully translate when the game started. That's why this draft feels different. It's not just about adding talent, it's about restoring confidence. It's about showing a clear vision that fans can believe in. And internally, you know the expectations are rising. An 11-win projection isn't something you throw around lightly. That sets a tone, that creates pressure. And once that expectation is out there, anything less starts to feel like a disappointment. So now, every position we've talked about becomes even more critical. Tight end isn't just a need, it's a potential weakness that could limit the offense. Wide receiver isn't just about depth, it's about finding someone who can change how defenses play you. The offensive line isn't just about improvement, it's about stability, and the draft is where all of that has to come together. Because if the Patriots hit on the right players, they find that tight end who can do more than just block. If they land that wide receiver who can stretch the field and win contested catches. If the offensive line gels the way they hope, completely changes the outlook of this team. Suddenly, that 11-win projection doesn't feel optimistic anymore. It feels realistic, but if they miss, if those questions remain unanswered, then you're looking at a team that might be competitive, might win some games, but still falls short of being a true contender. That's the fine line they're walking right now. And that's why every single decision from this point forward matters more than ever. And the closer you get to that moment, the draft, the final roster decisions, the real shaping of this team, the more you start to realize that this isn't just about filling holes anymore, it's about defining what the New England Patriots are going to be in this next era. Because right now, there's still a sense of in-between, not fully rebuilding, but not fully established, not lacking talent, but not overflowing with proven stars either. It's a roster that feels like it's on the edge of something, but hasn't taken that step yet. And that's why the margin for error is so small. Take the linebacker situation, for example. There's depth concerns there that haven't been fully addressed. You've got a couple of names, but beyond that, you're talking about potential rather than certainty. That's why the idea of bringing in a big-bodied, versatile linebacker from the draft starts to make a lot of sense. Someone with size, range, and upside, someone who can grow into a role instead of just filling snaps. The same logic applies across the board. You're not just looking for players, you're looking for long-term answers. But here's where things get really interesting. The Patriots also have flexibility. Multiple later-round picks, especially in those middle to late rounds, give them options. They can move up if they identify a target they love, they can stay put and stack talent, or they can even trade back and continue to build depth. That kind of flexibility is valuable, but only if you use it correctly, because having picks is one thing. Turning those picks into impact players is something else entirely. And this is where scouting, evaluation, and vision all come into play. You have to know exactly what you're looking for. Not just talent, but fit. Not just production, but projection. Which players actually translate to what you're trying to build? That's the question that will define this draft for the Patriots. And let's not overlook another layer here at the competition within the roster itself. Because when you bring in rookies, especially at positions like wide receiver, tight end, and edge, you're not just adding depth, you're creating pressure. Pressure on the current players to step up, improve, and prove they belong. That's how good teams evolve. Not just through additions, but through internal competition. So imagine this scenario. You draft a wide receiver with size and deep threat ability. You bring in a tight end who can actually contribute in the passing game. You add a young edge rusher with real upside. Suddenly, the entire dynamic of the team shifts. Now practices are more competitive. Now roles aren't guaranteed. Now players have to earn their snaps. And that's when you start to see real growth. But again, it all comes back to execution. Because we've seen teams with good ideas fail due to poor decisions, and we've seen teams with clear vision succeed because they hit on the right players at the right time. The Patriots are standing right